Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates were playing with dolls and dreaming about prom dresses, she was in her grandfather's backyard, learning how to hold a rifle properly. Her grandfather, a World War II veteran named Thomas Martinez, had served in the Pacific Theater and came home with stories that both thrilled and sobered young Sarah. "Steady hands, Mija," he would say in his gentle but firm voice, his weathered hands guiding her small fingers into the correct position. Shooting isn't about anger or power. It's about discipline, patience, and respect for what you're holding. Those summer afternoons when Sarah was just 8 years old shaped everything that would follow. Her grandfather taught her that a firearm was a tool that demanded the utmost respect, that every shot fired carried responsibility, and that true marksmanship came from the mind as much as the body. He showed her how to breathe, how to find her natural point of aim, and, most importantly, how to be still in both body and mind. Sarah's parents weren't entirely comfortable with their daughter's unusual interest. Her mother, Elena, worried that it wasn't appropriate for a young girl to be so fascinated with guns. Her father, Roberto, worked double shifts at the local manufacturing plant and often came home too tired to engage in lengthy discussions about his daughter's hobbies. But Thomas was insistent. "This girl has a gift," he told them one evening after Sarah had spent hours practicing with an old .22 rifle on tin cans lined up along the back fence. "I've seen plenty of soldiers in my time, and I'm telling you, she has something special. Don't you dare let the world convince her she can't pursue what she's good at just because she's a girl." By the time Sarah reached high school, her reputation as an exceptional shooter had spread throughout her small Texas town. She joined the school's rifle team, which had been struggling for years to find competitive shooters. Within months of Sarah joining, they began winning regional competitions. Other schools started asking who this new shooter was, and more than a few coaches were surprised to learn it was a teenage girl. Sarah's shooting coach, Mrs. Patterson, was a former Olympic hopeful herself who had to give up her dreams due to a shoulder injury. She recognized Sarah's natural talent immediately, but knew that raw ability alone wouldn't be enough. "Talent will get you noticed," she told Sarah during one of their many practice sessions. "But discipline and mental toughness will make you unbeatable. You're going to face people who don't think you belong in this sport. Some will underestimate you because you're young, others because you're female. Use that to your advantage." Mrs. Patterson pushed Sarah harder than any of the boys on the team. She made her practice in different weather conditions, with different equipment, and under various forms of pressure. She taught Sarah breathing techniques borrowed from meditation practices and helped her develop the mental focus that would become her trademark. During Sarah's junior year, something happened that would stick with her forever. The team was competing at a major regional championship, and Sarah was having the best day of her young career. Shot after shot hit the center of the target with mechanical precision. Other competitors and coaches began gathering to watch this unknown girl shoot. One coach from a prestigious military academy approached Mrs. Patterson during a break. "Who is that kid?" he asked, nodding toward Sarah. "That's Sarah Martinez," Mrs. Patterson replied proudly. "She's been shooting since she was 8. The coach watched Sarah's next series of shots and shook his head in disbelief. "I've been coaching for 20 years, and I've never seen natural accuracy like that. Has she considered military service? With skills like hers, she could write her own ticket." That conversation planted a seed in Sarah's mind. She had always admired her grandfather's service and the way he carried himself with quiet dignity and purpose. The idea of combining her shooting skills with serving her country began to appeal to her more and more. Her senior year brought new challenges and opportunities. College recruiters started calling, offering shooting scholarships to major universities. Her grades were excellent, and she could have pursued any number of academic paths. But Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of military service. She spent hours researching different military occupations that would utilize her marksmanship skills. She learned about military police, infantry units, and special operations forces. The more she read, the more excited she became about the possibility of serving her country while continuing to develop her shooting abilities. Her grandfather was thrilled when Sarah told him about her interest in military service. "The military will give you structure, discipline, and purpose," he said. "But more than that, It will teach you about leadership and what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself. Not everyone in Sarah's life was as supportive. Some family friends questioned why such a smart, capable young woman would want to join the military instead of pursuing a traditional college education. Her mother worried about the dangers and the masculine culture Sarah would be entering. Mija, you could be anything you want, Elena said during one of their conversations. You could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Why do you want to put yourself in harm's way? Sarah understood her mother's concerns, but she also felt a deep calling that was hard to explain. Mom, I want to serve something bigger than myself. I want to use my skills to protect people, and I want to see how good I can really become. During her final months of high school, Sarah began the process of enlisting in the Army. She met with recruiters, took the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, and scored exceptionally well in all categories. Her shooting scores during the initial evaluation were so high that the recruiting sergeant double-checked his equipment. Miss Martinez, he said, reviewing her targets, these scores are remarkable. Have you considered applying for specialized training programs? Sarah had been reading about various military occupational specialties, and one had captured her attention more than others: military police with a specialty in precision shooting. It combined law enforcement skills with advanced marksmanship training, and it offered opportunities for additional specialized training down the road. Her high school graduation ceremony was bittersweet. While her classmates talked about college plans and summer jobs, Sarah was preparing for something entirely different. She had already committed to reporting for basic training just 2 months after graduation. The night before she left for basic training, Sarah's grandfather gave her a gift that would become one of her most treasured possessions. It was a small leather journal that he had carried during his service in World War II. I want you to have this, he said, his eyes glistening with emotion. I wrote in it almost every day during the war. It helped me remember who I was and what I was fighting for. I think you might find it useful too. Sarah opened the journal and saw page after page of her grandfather's careful handwriting, documenting his experiences, his fears, his hopes, and his determination to serve with honor. On the first blank page, he had written a note. For Sarah, who has the courage to follow her dreams and the heart to serve others. Make your own mark on the world, Mija. I'm proud of you already. As Sarah packed her few belongings for basic training, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From those first afternoons with her grandfather learning to shoot tin cans, to dominating high school competitions, to making the decision to serve her country, every step had prepared her for what came next. She had no way of knowing that her path would eventually lead her to one of the most challenging and elite training programs in the military. She couldn't foresee the obstacles she would face, the people who would doubt her abilities, or the records she would ultimately shatter. All she knew was that she was ready to begin the next chapter of her journey, armed with exceptional skill, unwavering determination, and the lessons her grandfather had taught her about what it meant to serve with honor. The morning Sarah left for basic training, her entire family gathered to see her off. Her grandfather, now in his 80s but still standing proud and straight, saluted her as she got into the car. It was a moment that would stay with her through every challenge that lay ahead, a reminder of the legacy she was carrying forward and the new legacy she was beginning to create. Basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, was everything Sarah had expected and nothing like she had imagined. The physical demands were intense, but her years of maintaining discipline through shooting sports had prepared her well. What surprised her was how much she enjoyed the team-building aspects and the feeling of being part of something larger than herself. Drill Sergeant Williams was a compact woman with 20 years of service and a reputation for breaking down recruits who thought they already knew everything. During the first week, she noticed Sarah's composure and attention to detail, especially during weapons training. Martinez, she called out during their first trip to the firing range. I see you've handled a rifle before. Yes, Drill Sergeant, Sarah replied, maintaining the position of attention. We'll see about that. Everyone thinks they can shoot until they get here. When they reached the firing line, Sarah's familiarity with weapons safety and handling was immediately apparent. While other recruits fumbled with the basic mechanics of their M4 carbines, Sarah moved with practiced efficiency. Her shooting performance was even more impressive. During the qualification shoot, Recruits needed to hit a minimum number of targets at various distances to pass. Sarah hit every single target, many of them dead center. Drill Sergeant Williams walked down the line checking targets, pausing longer at Sarah's position. "Outstanding performance, Martinez," she said quietly. "But don't let it go to your head. This is just the beginning." Word of Sarah's shooting ability spread quickly through the company. Some recruits were impressed and wanted to learn from her. Others seemed resentful that someone was making them look bad. Sarah tried to stay focused on her own development while helping teammates when asked. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who oversaw advanced weapons training, began paying special attention to Sarah's progress. He had been an instructor for 5 years and had seen plenty of good shooters come through, but Sarah's combination of technical skill and mental composure stood out. "Martinez, where did you learn to shoot like that?" he asked after a particularly impressive training session. "My grandfather taught me when I was young, Staff Sergeant," Sarah replied. "Then, I shot competitively in high school. What's your goal here? What kind of assignment are you hoping for?" Sarah had been thinking about this question throughout basic training. "I'm interested in military police work, Staff Sergeant. Specifically, I'd like to get into precision shooting if possible." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. "There are opportunities for advanced training after you complete your initial military police school. But I'm going to tell you something honestly. It's going to be harder for you than for others. Some people in this business still have old-fashioned ideas about what women can and can't do." This wasn't the first time Sarah had heard such warnings, and it wouldn't be the last. But rather than discouraging her, these conversations only strengthened her resolve. She had faced doubts and skepticism throughout her high school shooting career, and she had learned that the best response was simply to perform at a level that made arguments impossible. During the final weeks of basic training, Sarah's platoon participated in a competition between companies. Each company selected their best performers in various categories to compete against other companies in the battalion. Sarah was chosen to represent her company in marksmanship. The competition took place on a Saturday morning, with several hundred soldiers watching from the stands. Sarah felt nervous for the first time in months, not because she doubted her abilities, but because she knew she was representing more than just herself. The format required competitors to engage targets at multiple distances under time constraints. Sarah's first few shots felt rusty, and she could hear murmurs from the crowd. But as she settled into her rhythm, everything else faded away. Shot after shot found its mark with increasing precision. When the scores were tallied, Sarah had not only won the competition but had set a new range record for the course of fire. The previous record had stood for 3 years, held by a recruit who had been a competitive shooter before enlisting. Captain Thompson, the company commander, approached Sarah after the ceremony. "Outstanding work today, Martinez. I've put in a recommendation that you receive priority consideration for advanced marksmanship training after you complete military police school." Military police training at Fort Gordon, Georgia, proved to be more challenging than basic training in different ways. The academic requirements were substantial, covering law enforcement procedures, detention operations, and security protocols. Sarah excelled in the classroom, but it was during the practical exercises that her unique background really showed. The training included scenarios that required precise shooting under stress, often with simulated civilians nearby. Many students struggled with these exercises, either being too conservative and missing opportunities to engage threats, or being too aggressive and risking collateral damage. Sarah consistently demonstrated the ability to make split-second decisions while maintaining precise shot placement. Sergeant First Class Johnson, the senior instructor for tactical shooting, had been skeptical when he first heard about the female recruit with exceptional marksmanship skills. He had seen plenty of soldiers who could shoot well on a clean range, but struggled when stress and complexity were added. "Martinez, you're up," he called during a particularly challenging scenario. The exercise required engaging multiple targets from cover while protecting simulated hostages. Sarah moved through the course methodically, engaging each threat with single, precisely placed shots. Her time was among the fastest in the class, and her accuracy was perfect. What impressed Sergeant Johnson most was her obvious situational awareness and decision-making under pressure. After the exercise, he pulled Sarah aside. "Where did you develop that kind of tactical awareness? That's not something you typically see from someone without combat experience." I spent a lot of time reading and studying, Sergeant, Sarah replied. My high school coach emphasized that good shooting was about more than just marksmanship. She taught me to think about angles, background, and what happens after you take the shot. Sergeant Johnson nodded approvingly. Keep that attitude. There's a rumor going around that some special operations units are looking for military police soldiers with advanced shooting skills for security team positions. If you're interested, I might be able to make some introductions. This was the first time Sarah had heard about potential opportunities with special operations units. She knew that such positions were extremely competitive and that the standards were exceptionally high. The idea both excited and intimidated her. During her final month at military police school, Sarah received her first assignment, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. She would be assigned to the 503rd Military Police Battalion, which provided security and law enforcement services for one of the Army's most important installations. Fort Bragg was home to numerous special operations units, including elements of the Navy SEALs who conducted training there. The base had multiple firing ranges and training facilities that were among the most advanced in the military. Sarah's first few weeks at Fort Bragg were focused on learning the specific procedures and requirements of her new unit. Her immediate supervisor, Sergeant Davis, was a 7-year veteran who had served deployments in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Martinez, I've heard good things about your shooting, he said during their first meeting. We'll see how you do with our qualification standards. They're a bit more challenging than what you've been used to. The qualification course at Fort Bragg was indeed more demanding than previous training. It included low-light shooting, shooting from vehicles, and engaging targets while wearing full combat gear. Sarah approached each challenge methodically, applying the fundamentals she had learned from her grandfather and developed through years of training. Her performance caught the attention of Master Sergeant Williams, the battalion's senior training NCO. He had been watching the new arrivals during their initial qualifications and was impressed by Sarah's consistency and adaptability. Martinez, how would you feel about helping with some advanced training programs? He asked after reviewing her scores. We occasionally host special operations units who need to qualify on our ranges. They could use an assistant who understands both safety protocols and advanced shooting techniques. This opportunity would prove to be the bridge between Sarah's current assignment and the challenges that lay ahead. Working with special operations units would expose her to training methods and standards that far exceeded anything she had experienced so far. Her first assignment supporting special operations training involved a Navy SEAL team that was conducting advanced precision shooting exercises. The team leader, Petty Officer First Class Thompson, was initially surprised to learn that his range safety officer would be a young female military police soldier. Are you familiar with the weapons systems we'll be using? He asked, reviewing the training schedule with Sarah. I've reviewed the technical manuals, Petty Officer Thompson, Sarah replied. If you have specific concerns, I'd appreciate you sharing them so I can address them before training begins. Thompson was impressed by her professional demeanor and preparation. Over the next several days, he watched as Sarah efficiently managed complex range operations while demonstrating exceptional knowledge of various weapons systems. On the final day of training, one of Thompson's team members was struggling with a particularly challenging shooting problem. The soldier needed to engage targets at extended range while accounting for wind and elevation changes. Mind if I make a suggestion? Sarah asked Thompson quietly. Thompson looked at his struggling team member, then back at Sarah. What do you think the problem is? Sarah described what she had observed about the shooter's technique and suggested some adjustments to his position and breathing rhythm. Thompson decided to let her try coaching the soldier. Within 15 minutes, the SEAL was consistently hitting targets that had been frustrating him all morning. Thompson was amazed by Sarah's ability to diagnose and correct shooting problems. Where did you learn to coach like that? He asked. Trial and error, mostly, Sarah replied. I've been helping people with shooting problems since high school. Everyone has different learning styles and physical limitations. You just have to figure out what works for each individual. That evening, Thompson approached Sarah with an opportunity that would change everything. His unit was looking for additional personnel for their security team, a position that would require extensive additional training, but would offer unprecedented opportunities for professional development. I can't promise anything, he said, but if you're interested, I'd be willing to put in a recommendation. The training standards are extremely high, and not everyone makes it through. But, based on what I've seen this week, I think you might have what it takes. Sarah felt her heart racing as she considered the implications. This was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about since enlisting, but she also knew it would be the most challenging thing she had ever attempted. After a moment of consideration, she looked Thompson in the eye and said simply, "I'm interested." The paperwork for Sarah's transfer to the Special Operations Support Unit took 3 months to process. During that time, she continued her regular duties while beginning an intensive physical and mental preparation program that Thompson had recommended. The standards she would face were unlike anything in conventional military training. "You need to understand," Thompson explained during one of their preparation sessions, "the people you'll be training with have been doing this for years. They've been through multiple deployments, advanced schools, and selection processes that wash out 90% of candidates. You'll be starting from zero in their eyes, regardless of your shooting ability." Sarah appreciated Thompson's honesty. She had always performed better when she knew exactly what she was up against. She began running longer distances, spending extra time in the weight room, and practicing shooting drills that simulated combat conditions. Her commanding officer, Captain Rodriguez, was initially resistant to losing one of his best military police soldiers. But after reviewing Sarah's performance records and the recommendation from the SEAL team, he agreed to support the transfer. "Martinez, this is an incredible opportunity," he told her during their final counseling session. "But I want you to understand the stakes. If this doesn't work out, it could affect your entire military career. Are you sure you're ready for this level of challenge?" Sarah had been asking herself the same question for months. The safe path would be to continue excelling in her current role, earn promotions, and build a solid career in military police work. But something deep inside her knew she had to try for something more challenging. "I understand the risks, sir," she replied. "But I also know that I'll regret it forever if I don't try." Her transfer orders came through in late fall. Sarah would report to a specialized training unit that prepared security personnel for high-risk assignments with Special Operations Forces. The training was conducted at multiple locations and could last up to 18 months, depending on the candidate's progress and aptitude. The night before she left Fort Bragg, Sarah called her grandfather. Now in his mid-80s, Thomas had been following her military career closely and was immensely proud of her achievements. "Mija, I want you to remember something," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. "When I was in the Pacific, I served alongside men from all different backgrounds. Some were college graduates, others had barely finished elementary school. Some were city boys who had never seen a gun before basic training. Others were country boys who had been hunting since childhood. You know what made the difference between the good soldiers and the great ones? What, abuelo? The great ones never let anyone else define what they were capable of. They defined it themselves, through their actions and their character. You've got both the skill and the character, Sarah. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Sarah's first day at the Special Operations Training Unit was deliberately intimidating. She arrived at 0500 hours to find 30 other candidates already assembled. She was the only woman in the group, and she could feel the skeptical stares of her fellow candidates. The senior instructor was Master Chief Petty Officer Jackson, a 25-year Navy veteran who had served with multiple special operations units. His opening remarks made the challenge clear. "Look around you," he said, surveying the assembled candidates. "Statistically, fewer than half of you will complete this program. Some of you will be dropped for academic failure, others for physical standards, and some will simply decide this isn't what you want to do with your life. This program exists to identify personnel who can perform at the highest levels under the most challenging conditions." The first phase of training lasted 8 weeks and covered basic special operations skills, advanced physical conditioning, and psychological evaluation. Sarah found the academic work manageable, but the physical standards were more demanding than anything she had previously experienced. Each day began with a physical training session that included distance running, strength training, and obstacle courses. The instructors deliberately created stress and fatigue before moving to weapons training, forcing candidates to maintain performance standards while physically and mentally exhausted. Sarah's shooting skills gave her an immediate advantage in many exercises, but she quickly learned that marksmanship was just one component of what was being evaluated. The instructors were looking for candidates who could think clearly under pressure, work effectively as part of a team, and maintain high standards even when everything seemed to be going wrong. During the third week, the first major elimination occurred. 6 candidates were dropped from the program for various reasons, including academic failure, medical issues, and failure to meet physical standards. Sarah had survived the first cut, but she knew the real challenges lay ahead. The shooting portion of the training was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. The standards were extraordinarily high, but, more importantly, the conditions were constantly changing. Candidates were required to engage targets while wearing different types of protective equipment from various positions, and often after completing other physically demanding tasks. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell, the senior marksmanship instructor, had initially been skeptical about having a female candidate in the program. He had served for 20 years and had strong opinions about physical standards and combat roles. However, his skepticism began to fade as he watched Sarah's performance. "Martinez, what's your background with precision shooting?" he asked after reviewing her scores from the first week of marksmanship training. "Competitive shooting in high school, gunnery sergeant, then standard military training." Mitchell looked at her scores again, then back at Sarah. "These aren't standard military scores. These are approaching professional competition levels. Have you had any formal long-range training?" "No, gunnery sergeant. I've been studying the technical aspects on my own, but I haven't had formal training in advanced techniques." This conversation marked a turning point in Sarah's training experience. Mitchell decided to take a personal interest in developing her abilities, seeing potential that went far beyond what even Sarah recognized in herself. "Martinez, I'm going to work with you on some advanced techniques," he said. "But I want you to understand something. The fact that you're here means you're already an exceptional shooter. What I'm going to teach you will take that to another level entirely." Over the following weeks, Mitchell introduced Sarah to concepts and techniques that were typically taught only to military snipers and special operations personnel. He showed her how to read wind conditions at extreme distances, how to calculate bullet drop and drift for different ammunition types, and how to maintain accuracy while shooting from unconventional positions. Sarah absorbed every lesson eagerly. She spent her limited free time studying ballistics manuals and practicing the mental calculations required for precision shooting. Her natural ability, combined with Mitchell's expert instruction, produced results that surprised even her instructors. During the midpoint evaluation of the first phase, candidates were required to demonstrate proficiency in all areas of training. The shooting portion required engaging targets at distances up to 800 meters under time constraints and environmental stress. Sarah's performance during this evaluation became the subject of discussion among the instructors. She had not only met all standards, but had exceeded them by margins that were extremely unusual for someone at her level of training. "I've been doing this for 15 years, Mitchell told Master Chief Jackson after reviewing the scores. "I've trained hundreds of candidates, including some who went on to become world-class snipers. This soldier has the most natural precision shooting ability I've ever seen." Word of Sarah's exceptional performance began to spread beyond her immediate training unit. Her combination of technical skill, mental toughness, and professional demeanor was exactly what special operations units looked for in support personnel. However, not everyone was impressed by Sarah's achievements. Colonel Harrison, who oversaw multiple training programs at the installation, had traditional views about women in combat-related roles. When he learned about the exceptional scores being posted by a female candidate, he decided to personally observe her performance. Colonel Harrison arrived at the range unannounced during a complex shooting exercise. The scenario required candidates to engage multiple targets from a prone position while simulating combat conditions. Sarah was in the middle of her sequence when she noticed the colonel watching from the observation tower. "Who was that soldier?" Colonel Harrison asked Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell. "That's Private First Class Martinez, sir. She's one of our top performers." Colonel Harrison watched as Sarah completed the course, hitting every target with precision that seemed almost mechanical. When the exercise concluded, he requested a private conversation with the training staff. "I've been reviewing the scores from this program," he said, "and I'm seeing some results that seem unusual. Are we maintaining appropriate standards?" Master Chief Jackson understood the colonel's implication immediately. "Sir, every candidate is held to identical standards. Private Martinez's scores reflect her actual performance. I find it hard to believe that someone with her limited experience could be outperforming soldiers with years of specialized training. I want to see her credentials reviewed, and I want her tested under more challenging conditions. This conversation would set in motion a series of events that would test not only Sarah's shooting abilities, but her mental resilience and determination. Colonel Harrison's skepticism would soon transform into a direct challenge that would either validate Sarah's exceptional abilities or expose what he believed to be inflated performance claims. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would ultimately define Sarah's military career and challenge assumptions about what was possible for a young soldier who refused to accept limitations others tried to place on her abilities. Colonel Harrison's challenge came during the final phase of Sarah's training program. He had spent weeks reviewing her performance records and consulting with other officers about what he perceived as impossible results from an inexperienced soldier. His solution was to arrange a special evaluation that would put Sarah's abilities to the ultimate test. "I'm establishing a special assessment protocol," he announced to Master Chief Jackson and Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell during a staff meeting. "Private Martinez will be evaluated using the same standards we apply to our most elite special operations personnel. If she's truly as exceptional as her scores suggest, this should be a formality." The assessment Colonel Harrison designed was unprecedented in its scope and difficulty. Sarah would be required to demonstrate proficiency with multiple weapon systems under conditions that simulated actual combat operations. The shooting standards were those typically used to evaluate Navy SEALs and other Tier 1 special operations personnel. When Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell learned about the special assessment, he was furious. "Sir, with respect, this evaluation goes far beyond what any soldier at her experience level should be expected to handle. These are standards developed for operators with years of specialized training." Colonel Harrison's response revealed his true motivations. "Sergeant Mitchell, if this soldier is going to work with special operations units, she needs to prove she can perform at their level. We can't afford to lower standards just to accommodate someone who doesn't belong in this environment." Mitchell realized that the colonel's challenge was motivated by more than just concern about standards. He decided to prepare Sarah as thoroughly as possible for what he knew would be the most difficult test of her military career. "Martinez, I need to tell you about something that's been arranged," Mitchell said during a private conversation. "Colonel Harrison has designed a special assessment for you. It's going to be extremely challenging, and I believe it's intended to prove that your previous performance was somehow artificial." Sarah felt a familiar sensation in her stomach, the same nervous energy she had experienced before major competitions in high school. But alongside the nervousness was something else: determination. She had faced skeptics and doubters throughout her shooting career, and she had learned that the best response was simply to perform. "What should I expect, Gunnery Sergeant?" "The assessment will include precision shooting at distances up to 1,000 meters, multiple weapon systems, time pressure, and physical stress. These are standards that typically take years to achieve. I'm going to do everything I can to prepare you, but I want you to understand what you're up against." The preparation for Sarah's special assessment became an intensive 2-week crash course in advanced tactical shooting. Mitchell worked with her during official training hours and continued coaching during his personal time. He introduced her to weapon systems she had never used and taught her techniques that were normally reserved for the military's most elite shooters. "Remember everything your grandfather taught you about fundamentals," Mitchell reminded her during one particularly challenging practice session. "When the pressure is highest, fall back on the basics. Breathing, sight alignment, trigger control. Everything else is just details." Sarah's fellow candidates in the training program learned about the special assessment and reacted with mixed emotions. Some were supportive and offered encouragement. Others seemed to resent the attention she was receiving, believing that the assessment was unnecessary and that Sarah was getting special treatment. "This is ridiculous," one candidate complained loudly during a break. "None of the rest of us have to prove ourselves like this. Why should she get to be the center of attention?" Another candidate, Staff Sergeant Williams, who had served multiple combat deployments, saw the situation differently. "Are you kidding me?" he responded. "She's being held to a higher standard than any of us. I wouldn't want to be in her position." As word of the assessment spread throughout the installation, It began to attract attention from personnel who normally had no involvement with the training program. Officers and senior enlisted personnel from various units requested permission to observe, making the event far more public than Colonel Harrison had initially intended. The day of the assessment arrived with unseasonably cold weather and gusty winds that would make precision shooting significantly more challenging. Sarah arrived at the range early, carrying the confidence that came from thorough preparation and the knowledge that she had done everything possible to get ready. Colonel Harrison was present, along with a panel of evaluators that included senior personnel from multiple special operations units. The audience included more than 50 military personnel from across the installation, many of whom had heard rumors about the exceptional young soldier who was about to be tested. Master Chief Jackson explained the assessment protocol to Sarah and the assembled observers. Private Martinez will be required to engage targets using 4 different weapon systems at distances ranging from 100 to 1,000 meters. She will be evaluated on accuracy, time standards, and performance under stress. These standards are identical to those used for Tier 1 special operations personnel. The first phase of the assessment involved precision shooting with a standard military rifle at distances up to 600 meters. Sarah settled into position and began her breathing routine, blocking out the crowd of observers and focusing entirely on the fundamentals Mitchell had drilled into her. Her first shot hit dead center at 300 meters. The second and third shots grouped so tightly that the impact holes overlapped. As the distances increased, Sarah's consistency remained remarkable. Shot after shot found the target with precision that seemed almost mechanical. "Impossible," Colonel Harrison muttered, watching through binoculars. Those conditions should be making that level of accuracy extremely difficult. The second phase required Sarah to use a precision rifle system typically employed by military snipers. This weapon was far more sophisticated than anything she had used extensively, and the targets were placed at the maximum effective range of 1,000 meters. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell watched nervously as Sarah examined the weapon and checked the scope settings. At this distance, with the challenging wind conditions, even experienced snipers sometimes struggled to achieve the required accuracy. Sarah's first shot at 1,000 meters took several seconds to reach the target. Through her scope, she watched the bullet impact just outside the center ring. She made a slight adjustment to account for the wind and fired again. This shot hit dead center. Her remaining shots at extreme distance were equally impressive. Each bullet found the target with accuracy that demonstrated not just exceptional marksmanship, but also a sophisticated understanding of external ballistics and environmental factors. The third phase of the assessment was designed to test Sarah's ability to maintain accuracy while under physical and mental stress. She was required to complete an obstacle course, then immediately engage targets with a carbine while her heart rate was elevated and her hands were shaking from exertion. This portion of the evaluation was where Colonel Harrison expected Sarah's performance to break down. Combat shooting required a different skill set than precision marksmanship, and the ability to perform under stress was something that typically took years to develop. Sarah completed the obstacle course and immediately transitioned to the firing position. Her breathing was labored, and she could feel her heart pounding, but she applied the stress management techniques Mitchell had taught her. She focused on her breathing rhythm and allowed her body to settle before engaging the first target. Her performance under stress was even more impressive than her precision shooting. Despite the physical demands of the obstacle course, she engaged multiple targets with speed and accuracy that exceeded the minimum standards by substantial margins. The final phase of the assessment involved shooting scenarios that simulated actual combat conditions. Sarah was required to engage targets from various positions, including prone, kneeling, and standing, while wearing full combat gear and under time pressure. As Sarah completed each scenario, the murmurs from the crowd of observers grew louder. Officers and senior enlisted personnel who had seen thousands of soldiers qualify on various weapons were witnessing performance that defied their expectations. When the assessment concluded, Colonel Harrison requested that the scores be verified multiple times. The results showed that Sarah had not only met every standard, but had exceeded them by margins that were extraordinary for someone at her experience level. Master Chief Jackson announced the results to the assembled crowd. Private First Class Martinez has achieved perfect scores on all phases of this assessment. Her performance exceeds the minimum standards by an average of 27%. The response from the crowd was a mixture of applause and stunned silence. Many of the observers had never seen shooting performance at this level, even from personnel with years of specialized training. Colonel Harrison approached Sarah as she was cleaning her equipment. His expression was a mixture of amazement and embarrassment. He had designed the assessment to expose what he believed were inflated performance claims, but instead had provided a forum for Sarah to demonstrate abilities that surpassed those of the most elite soldiers. "Private Martinez," he said, his voice lacking its usual authority. "That was remarkable. I owe you an apology. I allowed my preconceptions to cloud my judgment, and I put you through an unnecessarily difficult evaluation." Sarah's response was characteristically professional. "No apology necessary, sir. I appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate my abilities." The aftermath of Sarah's assessment changed everything about her military career trajectory. Within days, she received inquiries from multiple special operations units who wanted her to join their teams. The assessment had not only validated her exceptional abilities but had also demonstrated her mental toughness and professionalism under extreme pressure. Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell was both proud and amazed by what he had witnessed. "In 20 years of training special operations personnel," he told Master Chief Jackson, "I have never seen natural ability combined with that level of mental discipline. That soldier is going to go as far as she wants to go in this business." Word of Sarah's performance spread throughout the special operations community. Her assessment scores became a new benchmark for exceptional marksmanship, and requests for her assignment came from units that typically had their pick of the military's most elite personnel. Sarah's grandfather learned about her achievement through a phone call from his granddaughter, who was still processing what had happened. "Abuelo, I think I might have impressed some people today," she said, understating the magnitude of her accomplishment. Thomas Martinez listened as Sarah described the assessment and its results. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Mija, do you remember what I told you about great soldiers defining their own capabilities?" "Yes, sir. Today, you didn't just define your capabilities. You redefined what people think is possible. I'm proud of you, but more importantly, I hope you're proud of yourself." As Sarah hung up the phone, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From shooting tin cans in her grandfather's backyard to shattering performance records that had stood for years, every step had prepared her for this achievement. She had proven that exceptional ability, when combined with determination and proper training, could overcome any prejudice or preconception. More importantly, she had opened doors for others who might face similar doubts about their capabilities. Sarah's story was far from over, but this day would always stand as the moment when she proved that the only limits on her potential were the ones she chose to accept. Colonel Harrison's attempt to humble her had instead provided the platform for her to demonstrate that some people are truly exceptional, regardless of what others expect or believe possible.